Okay. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and get started then. Welcome to the Woodworkers Guild meeting. It's February. I hope everybody had a chance to look at the newsletter. It got emailed out. You know, we use the email or the newsletter basically to communicate with everybody anymore, since these meetings tend to be a lot shorter than what our general meetings are when we have a lot of people there. And so make sure you're taking a look at the newsletter. A lot of people put a lot of effort into it. I want to thank Grady for all the effort he puts into it and makes it happen. It always looks good. And, no errors in it. And I think we should be proud of the newsletter that we have. So check out the newsletter for all that information. One of the things that's in there every month's a toy report. But Vicki will have you give us a toy report so we know what the status is. Can't hear you, Vicki.
Okay, I am muted. You hear me now?
Barely hear you.
Well, let me try a volume thing.
Need more.
Hang on. Sorry about that. Audio settings. How's that? Better?
Better. If you got any more volume, you could use a little bit more.
All right, how's that?
Pretty good.
Okay. Well, yes, we did have a February toy pickup and distribution. And in that day, we received 617 toys from 8 members. And I want to send a special thank you to Paul Deutsch, whom I failed to identify as a first-time contributor this month. So thank you, Paul, and hope to see more of your toys. So 617 brings us to our year-to-date total of a little over 1,000 at 1,035 we received. And we were only able to deliver to 4 of our 7 regular recipients. So our delivery total for February was 440, taking us to 989 for the year. And that's 16% of our target, so I think pretty good. Our cumulative from the beginning of time total takes us to 76,201 toys delivered. So I still think that, I heard on the news today that the world is full of more good people than bad people. And I think most of them belong to this guild and are doing great community service. So thank you to everyone. And we will have a March pickup and delivery. Exact date and time, we're still working on that, but we'll announce it later. And as always, anyone that can't make that delivery as scheduled, I am happy to be a recipient for anyone that wants to drop them off at my house. If you just give me a text or a call, and we'll set up a time and a date. So that's all I have. Dan, did you have anything else by chance? Dan, no? Okay.
Yeah. And Hal, you've got a video of some of the toys that were donated last month.
Yep, I do. I guess I need to see if I can make this work this month. Let's see if I can share my screen. David, where are you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Share my screen. Shall I roll it?
Yeah.
Okay, here it goes. Wish me luck.
I'm Vicki Berry, and I'm part of the Toy Committee. We're out at Fowles Park today, where we had collections from 8 individuals, giving us a total of 617 toys for the month of February. I wanted to showcase some of the ones that we collected today because they're new and might give you some ideas. One of them was the infamous Cracker Barrel peg game from John Bronson. Thank you, John. And Bill Schucott came up with a couple of new vehicles. One is a grater, and the other is what we think is the Munster's home vehicle. Then we had Linda Turner, who's always so creative, donate a new game, which is an old game, which is get the ball in the cup. I'm not going to pretend to be able to do it. And she also came up with at least 5 new wands. And these wands are great because they actually have movement and a little more force. I would say some of those that want to be pilots. So a plane, a heart, a spinning flower, a rocket, and then a star. So thank you, Linda, for your continued creativity. So that's all we're going to report today. More will come next month, we hope. Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it. Show and tell, we've been requesting lots of good stuff for the newsletter since we're not there in person. We've been seeing lots of good items show up on the in the newsletter, and appreciate everybody sending that information in there. We've got some more show and tell video. Hal, you want to run the video of some other stuff that was brought out to the shop?
Sure. Did you guys, were you able to see Vicky, the video?
Not full screen. She got reduced down to a small square.
Sorry, Vicky. All right. Well, I'm hitting my share the screen button, and let's see what I can do here.
We see your control panel.
Font, and I got the patterns.
Hal, I don't think you want to share your screen. Just change the webcam like that. There you go.
For these out of scroll saw woodworking, and they're little hedgehogs that will walk down a ramp. They're made of half-inch pieces of wood. You can do any combination of woods you want. They're made out of walnut and pine and a 1/4-inch dowel. They can be done either with a scroll saw, which is how I did them, but they're easy enough they could be done with a bandsaw. And they take, half an hour, 45 minutes a piece to make. I made 6 of them for the toy program.
Wayne Humphrey, and these are some of the models I built from plans that have been in Wood Magazine. Wood Magazine over the years has run plans for a whole lot of different equipment. And one of the nice things about it is that they're relatively easy to build, but they're pretty sturdy. They're not just models that have to sit around on a shelf. They can't be abused a whole lot, but a child who was semi-careful with playing with them could play with them for quite a while and not do damage to them. The little front loader is a very cute design. The bucket goes up and down, pivots. Nothing much to it other than a lot of parts, and you don't need anything special except some acorn nuts to put on the thread ends to cover up the sharp edges there. And it fits on the trailer that goes on the back of the truck right here. There's other pieces of equipment that'll fit onto this trailer also. And the trailer, of course, comes off of the truck. And one of the things that can go on here is a dump trailer. And you can load it up with cargo, and it tips to the side to dump its contents out over here. This is just a half a piece of PVC pipe right here that's been sanded down with all the markings taken off of it. And of course, the truck is typical unknown design manufacturer, but heavy duty, sturdy truck. So check past issues of Wood Magazine, go to Wood Magazine's website, and you can find plans for these.
Rich Sanders here. I've got a couple little projects. Number one here, we've got a napkin holder. I made the one, and that was kind of a mistake because now I have to make 3 more. Between the wife's sister and my 2 daughters, the orders are already here. Now this, I found, this is the fall of 2015 issue of the Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts. is where that's located. If you can't come up with that, give me a holler and I can copy and send copies. Number 2 item, back about a year back, I made another version of a bowl and it was bad enough. This one now, I couldn't believe what it takes to get that done because of all the 90-degree corners along with the curves. And this I got, if you go online, there's a guy by the name of Alex Fox, and he does all kinds of fancy projects like this, along with having he's got his layouts on sale. It seems to me it's like $5 or $6 for a drawing.
That's it.
Okay. Yeah, our thanks to everybody who brought items out to the shop that we could shoot some video on. Rich Sanders' work's always nice, and Keith does some interesting things. And if he had enough of his little porcupines, we could do some races and have some bets. But it takes a while to make it down that little inclined ramp. Moving on to some other things. What's come up in the past week is an email that we got from Rockler. And in there, they had some designs for student desk. And all of a sudden, the light bulb went on. And we thought, well, we've been working with Bring Me a Book St. Louis and making book boxes. And he's been passing those book boxes out to kids who are underserved, is one of the terms that they use, and along with some books. And we thought, with all these kids at home trying to study, need a place to set their computer, a lot of them probably don't have a desk to call their own to work from, probably working on a kitchen table and having to move at dinner time and that type of thing. But this email from Rockler had several different plans for desk in it. And we're going to build some prototype desk, and Michael Shipley of Bring Me a Book St. Louis has told us that he can get these things distributed out to kids who could use them and need them. And so it's just another community involvement project that we're looking to get into. And it'll temporarily take the place of book boxes. We've got a couple of hundred of those in inventory and not going to be needing those for a while. So we're putting together information on that. And as soon as we get some plans firmed up on how we're going to approach this problem, build them, that type of thing, we'll get an email out to everybody and hope to get a lot of participants. They're pretty quick and easy to build, these desks are, and I think it'll make a worthwhile contribution to the community out there. So we got that going on. And want to pass on one piece of information. Cecil Robertson, a longtime member of ours, who everybody should know or has met at one time or the other, used to be the webmaster. He has passed away last Tuesday. Cecil was here at the meeting last month with us and talking and anxious to get back into the shop, feeling good, but things took a pretty quick turnaround. So our condolences to his wife, Dee, who's a member, and to Cecil and Dee's families. Funeral arrangements haven't been made yet, and there'll probably be some type of memorial service in a couple of months here in the St. Louis area. So with that done, we'll move on to our guest speaker tonight. Scott Wunder is our guest speaker, and I think a whole lot of you know Scott. Newer members may not have met him, but Scott's a past president of the St. Louis Woodworkers Guild, and runs Wunder Woods out in St. Charles, a hardwood lumber supplier. And we'll just turn it over to Scott. Scott's got lots of interesting stories about how he gets wood and everything else, and we'll just let him tell you. So Scott, take it.
All right. Thank you very much. First of all, let me get my screen working here because I'm new to this, but I think I can get it. 1 second. How about this? Can everybody see it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm Scott Wunder from Wunder Woods. Good to see you guys. Our company specializes in custom furniture, mostly. We tell everybody we're a custom woodworking shop. And I say I'm a custom woodworking shop with a wood problem, meaning that I like wood and I can't not go out and get wood. So we do both. We do custom woodworking and we sell lumber. Right now we sell a lot of lumber and slabs because the slabs are highly in style right now. So if you come to our shop, you'll see a lot of woodworking going on, but you'll probably be overwhelmed. And I probably should take a picture of the shop, I guess, the inside with all the wood in there, because I try to dazzle people with the amount of wood that we have. And I feel happiest when the shop is full of wood and I'm surrounded by wood and buried in sawdust. So I try to have other people share that joy when they come in there and show them as much wood as possible. So that's generally what happens. A lot of people come in and the first thing they ask me when they see all the trees is, where do I get my trees? And my first answer, just to be funny, is I say outside. But then I also say that there's a lot of places to get trees. You'd be amazed. They're pretty much everywhere. If you start looking, it's kind of like having a black Suburban that you drive, and then you notice that everybody else is driving a black Suburban. Well, if you go outside and look for trees, especially ones laying down that people will let you have, they're pretty much everywhere. So I go out and get trees from a lot of places. This first slide is actually at my last house after a tornado went through in Hazelwood. Tornadoes are good to me. They're not always good to the people who are in the path of it, but they're good to me. I didn't live in this house at the time. We had just moved out, but this is my backyard after the tornado went through, basically went down our driveway. So this is in Hazelwood. And so you can see there's a lot of trees down there. We used to have a nice wooded backyard. Now it's wide open, or at least the people that live there have a wide open yard. This is the front yard from the same house. And as you can tell, there's a lot of trees laying around. A lot of it got cut up into short, small pieces. But the good news with the tornado is you can just kind of follow the path of the tornado and keep knocking on all the neighbors' houses and see what they're going to do with their trees. We had a good, I'm going to say run, maybe not a good run, but a bad run for other people. A good run of a few years ago, it seemed like was there a tornado every month. So that kept me quite busy. And I've got a big pile of logs still from those tornadoes that I never even got to. So they do sometimes rot. People always ask me that because they'll see a lot of logs that I have out there that look like they're not that great. I always say they're aging like fine wine. They're getting spalted, and then some of them, they might rot into the ground, but the ones that do rot in the ground probably weren't that great anyways, because I never got around to milling them. The ones that get milled first, obviously, are like the walnuts and things like that. And then the ones that don't get milled, maybe they weren't that great. Another place that I get them from is from the river. We do a lot of salvaging when I can. I usually stop by the river and whenever I can. A lot of times, especially during the summer, the topography out there changes. You know, the water goes up and down, washes logs around. A lot of times I can get them just at the boat ramps. I can go in there and just wait for the water to go down and pull my truck up to the boat ramp, find some nice logs. I know where all the good log jams are at, so I can go and hook them up. This is one. That's a silver maple, which is common along the river. It looks like it's sort of in a precarious position, but actually it was in a nice spot because when I cut it off, then it just falls down in the river, and that's kind of a little wash off spot, wash out spot. So there's not really much current there. So when it falls in, it just floated there, and then we can kind of hook it up to the boat and pull it out. We don't really, when we use the boat, we don't really pull the logs. We kind of steer the logs. We kind of go downstream. So I always work upstream. And then we time to the side of the boat and then float downstream and kind of steer them. We can't really drive them because they're quite heavy, but they float well. And, you know, it's pretty amazing actually when you're out there, how easy that it is to move the logs when they're floating, you know, because you know they weigh a lot, but when they're floating, they're almost feels like nothing. They just bounce around. So that's a silver maple log that has some nice lumber in it. There is, this is one of the logs that got me started on the river logs. I found this on the bank down in St. Charles. Is a nice burly maple. And I saw that like on the first time I ever even thought about looking for logs on the river. And that's when I found them the first day without even looking. And I said, man, I need to figure out how to get that thing out of there. Because it's a nice big burl. The whole log was like that, but it was just amazing that, you know, you got all the logs laying out there and they're easy to see what the figure of it is from the outside. And all you got to do is get them off out of the river. So that right there is one of the things that started my logging expedition on the river. This is one of the best logs I ever got. This is a walnut log. And that's a fresh cut on the end. So it looks just as kind of green and gray or whatever on the end as it does on the outside. And my best guess, I can hardly even guess how long that thing was in the river, but you see the shape of it where the little, I think you can see my cursor on there maybe, where this is sculpted out like right here. It's almost like columns on a Greek temple or something like that. Those are from the water eroding the log. The log itself, the rings on the log are round. So I know that walnut had been in the river for a long, long, long time. And it made some excellent lumber. I think I got a picture of what I made with it here. That's the lumber from that log. That's a wide peninsula that we made. It's a glue up of 3 pieces, but that's without any stain on it. This right here, like you can see the edges, there's no sapwood. The sapwood basically had rotten off, you know, probably 100 years ago, or however long ago it was. But it made the deepest, darkest, nicest, richest, even grained walnut that I've ever seen. The other thing about it was it dries really fast. I don't know what happens, but when the wood is in the river, I think the cells, imagine like your skin breaking down, like the cells that the outside breaks down. So I think the water can go through it freely, but the structure's still there. This lumber or the wood from the salvaged logs dries super fast. Like it air dried in probably like 2 weeks and kiln dried in just a couple more. It was amazing. I couldn't believe it. I didn't believe that my moisture meter was even working right because this stuff dried so fast. Another place I get my trees from is from Tree Services. This is the big red elm that was being cut down. I like this one because it's giant. This one had, well, the base log, which is 8 feet tall and about 6 feet across. This is the view on this one is the skinny side. It was kind of, you can tell it was the oblong shape because it has 2 big leads going up it. It was 6 feet across the long way and about 4 feet across the view you're looking at the bottom. And then it has another 12 feet of 2 logs right there, and then another 12 feet of 2 more logs. So I got 5 giant logs out of that thing. And they came out very, very nice. The tree service guys are happy when I come along on those, so they don't have to mess with them. They'd much rather just hand them to me, and then they don't have to deal with it. So I get a lot from tree services. And then I get a lot from construction sites. I like the picture of this one just because this log is so huge. This is a sycamore. I actually didn't end up doing anything with this sycamore because it was 100% hollow. There was just a shell of a tree there. But this is right up from my shop, and it was so giant next to my truck, I thought it was too cool not to take a picture of. So I had big dreams of using this log, but after I cut it up, there wasn't much there. So unfortunately, I didn't do anything with that one, but it's big. This is also at a construction site. And I had to post that picture because that's as deeply as I ever got the truck buried. Those are walnut logs, which they're quite big. So you can tell they were heavy. And I found a nice soft spot in the construction site where the truck got buried. So I was able to get it out, of course, eventually with the help of some friends and get those logs back. So that's part of my tree problem, is that I'll still put way too many trees on my truck. This is another job site, construction site, and you can see there's a lot going on there. I thought it was pretty cool with all the machinery, and they were cutting down the trees, pushing them aside and bringing them over to me at the landing, and I got all those for free. So they were just gonna grind them up and do nothing with them, and luckily I talked them into it. There's a lot of white oak and hickory in there. So the construction sites are good when the people let me in there to actually harvest the wood. A lot of times they don't because of the red tape and everything, but when they let me in, it can be really good because those are nice clean trees. This one right here, this is a picture of my Lucas sawmill, which is one of the sawmills that we use. This is like one of the first sawmills I ever got. But one of the sawmills that we still use regularly. The Lucas mill, I could do a whole program on the Lucas mill, but the Lucas mill works nice because it can set up, you can see it's kind of spindly structure, but it has just enough structure, just as much as it needs to do what it needs to do. And it sets up around the log. So I have the equipment to move the logs, but when I started, I didn't. And this was the first kind of like commercial mill that I got. And it's nice because you can set it up around the logs. You can, in just a couple minutes, I can put this whole sawmill in the back of my pickup truck. And all these parts are aluminum and lightweight and small. And you can set it up, and you can see Mike there. That's one of my guys who works for me. He's not a small guy. That's a very big sycamore log and it's on the ground. So this mill will set up, and since you can put it around the log anywhere, you can kind of mill the log wherever it's at and mill the big slabs. And that's what we mill a lot of the big slabs with. I will tell you that right now, though, I also have met a good friend of mine. He's now a good friend. I knew I was going to be a good friend as soon as I met him. His name is Kyle Betcher. He's up in Foley, Missouri, and he built his own sawmill. And it'll cut 6 feet wide, and he does a lot of cutting for me now, just because we can't kind of keep up with the sawing. And his bandsaw is much faster actually than the Lucas, but we still use the Lucas because it's cool. Because I'm talking about sawmills, I like to show my old sawmill. This used to be the sawmill that I used every day. It's an old Corley circle sawmill. I miss it quite often, but it was pretty dangerous, as you can tell. And I couldn't find enough people that wanted to help me and work hard enough and fast enough to keep this thing going. I could go and work by myself, and I could get a lot of stuff cut. But if I had somebody working with me, I could get a lot of stuff cut. and it would quickly bury me in logs and slabs, and it was just ended up being way too much work for one person. So I'm sad that I don't have this mill anymore because it was so fast, but I went back to the Bandsaw Mill, which I got a picture of it right here, I'm sure. This is another picture of the Corley with a big cherry log on it. That's a cherry log, yes, by the way. That's a giant cherry log. That thing, I think it was like 50 inches in diameter. It was giant. But the Corley could handle it, which was really neat too. Here's the bandsaw that I use a lot these days. And there's another big cherry log. I told you I have a wood problem. That is a super nice cherry log, by the way. And that Timber King mill is the same one I still use. It's a manual mill. And I don't mind the manual part. I've got equipment to move the logs if I need to. So that's the only difference now is I use that mill. I put an electric motor on it and typically use it inside now. So it's out of the weather and I can stay dry and keep working. This is my log truck, which I like to show with the giant logs on it because people are always amazed by the logs that I carry. This one's extra fun because it's so long. Now you can't carry regularly 25-foot logs like that on a 12-foot bed. But you can do it if you make sure you put a few short logs on front and on top to hold it down. I can tell you from experience, if you drive with really long logs and you don't have any short logs on top, that the steering is not so great. So I've learned what I can do as far as how I can push that. I turn a lot of heads when I drive around with that on the back. So anyways, before I go too far, let me go back here real fast. So I got a few things I want to talk about. One, a lot of people come in and they ask me what is my favorite? And I will tell you that I like a lot of woods. And the reason they're asking me what my favorite is because it's kind of like going to a restaurant where you want to have the waiter tell you what's the best food so you can order that because they want to just come in and they want to get whatever wood I tell them is the best. And I tell them that whatever I've got in the shop, it's in there for a reason. It may not be the best for one thing, but it is probably the best for something. And they always ask me, well, what's your favorite? And I tell them that my favorite wood to mill and my favorite wood to work with is sassafras. Now, they're always surprised by that because most people have never worked with sassafras. But if you ever get a chance, sassafras is lightweight, cuts well, smells great, dries flat. It does everything fantastic. The only reason that it's not used more often, one, is that the trees don't get very big often, and it's kind of soft. But other than that, we love sassafras. And so this is me putting in a word for sassafras if you can find it. I don't have any now because as soon as I get it, I sell it because I tell people how great it is. But that's our number one. I also like walnut, of course, because it's worth the most money. Walnut will definitely, it's easy to sell. Everybody wants walnut and it's worth the most money per board foot. So I can't not like walnut. One of my other favorites is hickory. Hickory has a lot of nice character to it. It tends to have a lot of bark inclusion, things like that, different colors. And I also love the smell of it. It smells, and if you haven't smelled hickory, people, they don't realize what they're smelling when they smell hickory because they think of like hickory smoked bacon or whatever, but you're really mostly smelling bacon. The bacon, the hickory smells super sweet. It smells like a bakery. It's like sugar. So when we get to hickory, that's fantastic. I love that. One of my other favorites is elm. And I've got a couple pictures coming up here of the elm. I use elm a ton. People don't think of elm. They don't normally see elm, but when we get a chance and I can show people elm, I could sell elm all day long because once it's done, it just looks beautiful. So anyways, when we are working in the shop, I've got some major tools that I like to talk to people about because when people come in the shop, they obviously walk around and dream about having the tools at their house. And the number one that we're using a lot right now is that CNC router right there. I didn't know how much I would use a CNC router, but we use that thing all the time. I've only had it for less than a year, and I'm getting ready to buy another one because we use it. It's running all day long, every day, and it's just a fantastic tool. We use it mostly for flattening slabs. We just set it in there and we can plane anything. So you don't have to worry about horsing big stuff through the planer. You can just set it in there and it can start planing and just works while you're working in the background. The next one that I use a lot now is my vacuum kiln, which is another fantastic tool. With these slabs that we've been doing a lot of, we can't dry them fast enough, and the big thick ones are hard to dry in a timely fashion. And so I broke down this year and bought a vacuum kiln, which is making a huge difference in our operation to just get wood pushed through. I don't know that we're going to necessarily be doing slabs forever, but the vacuum kiln I'm going to be using forever. Even if we're just cutting 4/4 lumber, it's still going to be a fantastic tool. So that was an easy decision for me, even though it was super expensive. It was an easy decision for me to know that I'm going to be able to dry wood forever and just keep it pumping through. Real quick, the vacuum kiln, just because you're going to ask, you're probably wondering how fast it is. The kiln, it's advertised to dry 1 inch of thickness per week. So if you have maple, that's based on maple. So if I cut maple fresh, put it in there 1 inch thick, it'll be completely dry in 1 week, which is fantastically fast. I will tell you it's exponentially slower for thicker woods, but still way faster than my normal everyday dehumidification kiln. So this vacuum kiln is getting a lot of use. I spent a lot of time packing that and unpacking that. This is another machine that gets a lot of use in our shop. It's a wide belt sander. If you ever have a chance to get a wide belt sander, I'd highly recommend it. I didn't pay a lot for this one either, by the way. It was only $2,000. I got it at the right time when the recession was happening and the companies, everybody was going out of business, unfortunately for them. But it worked well for me. And this $2,000 machine has been, it's used nonstop in the shop. So I would recommend if you can get one to have it. I don't know how I worked before without it because now we're just used to it. And we're like, okay, put it in the sander and it's done. So that's another one in our shop that we use a lot. And then I like to brag about my planer too, because we just put in a helical head in that planer. And I'm going to tell you, if you don't have a helical head in your planers and you've ever thought about putting a helical head in your planer, spend the money. After you buy your wide belt sander, go and put a helical head in your planer because it has made so much of a difference. It has fantastic results, and the planer is so quiet now. Half the time I got to look on the other side to see if it's actually planing when the lumber comes through, because the planing is actually quieter than the motor running, which is just amazing. Because before, that thing would just smack the lumber, and it's a strong planer. It would just smack the lumber around so loud that half the time it seemed like we couldn't even be in the shop. And now you can have a conversation the whole time while this planer's running, which is just amazing. And like I said, the quality coming off that planer is fantastic. So I'd recommend the helical head if you can get it. This is my joiner, which I use a ton. I think I've often thought about doing a whole video series on the joiner because the joiner gets so much use in my shop and it's a fun tool to use. We use it for flattening the faces on all of the lumber and everything before it goes through, the planer, etc., doing the edges. I use it for so many different things. It's constantly being used. If the wood's not in the planer, it's going through the joiner beforehand, and it's used a lot. And the other thing I like to brag about, and this is with much chagrin on my part, is the Festool tool systems. It was painful for me to start using them because they're so expensive. All the young kids in the shop thought I needed to buy them, especially since I was buying them for them to use. And now that we started using them, I'm obviously not going to probably buy anything else. We use there's a picture of the domino right there. We use the domino all the time. It's a fantastic tool. If you don't know what it is, it works like the biscuit joiner, but it's just it's a lot more accurate, a lot more versatile, and it just works fantastically. We also, from the Festool line, and I'm not paid by Festool, by the way, although I could be at this point. We use the track saw a lot. I love that track saw. I always have it with me. If I go on an install anywhere, I always make sure I bring that with me, because you don't need a table saw or anything. I use that constantly, and it works so nice. You can just lay it down on the piece of wood, run the track saw on it, and it makes a perfectly great cut every time. And then this is one I had the most difficult time showing a picture of, and that's their vacuums. I spent so much money on vacuums. Their vacuums are not cheap, and we got 5 of them in the shop, but they work fantastic. We've never had any issues with them. And they're awesome because you plug the tools into them, and you can go to a customer's house and you can run it, and you know that you're not going to have any dust. Again, they're expensive. It's going to be hard for you to buy one, but once you do, then you'll think, okay, it was worth the money. Here's Scott showing off the sander. We use a ton of these sanders. Hooked up with the shop vac from Festool. They work fantastic. Again, I can't believe I'd be the last person to tell you how great the tools are, because they were so expensive, but they work great. So I would highly recommend using them if you can get a chance to use them. And then the last tool I use a lot in the shop is the chainsaw. I always have a chainsaw with me, and anytime that I get a chance to use it, I pull out the big chainsaw and hurry up and cut stuff up. We're cutting slabs all the time, trimming things, and I like to impress the customers when I can and just grab the giant chainsaw and hurry up and cut something. So I highly recommend using a chainsaw for your fine woodworking whenever you can. So a lot of people ask me when they come in the shop about finishing, because we do a lot of finishing. And I try to have stuff in the shop that shows off how well we finish. It also helps me sell a lot of jobs, because a lot of people know that they can do something with the wood, but then they can't necessarily get such a good finish. And between me and a couple of guys in the shop who are really good finishers, I'd say we do a really good job on the finish. And people, so it becomes a topic in the shop, and we talk a lot about that. They always ask, what do you use for a finish? And the thing that we're using the most right now is crystal, which I got a picture of right there. It's a conversion varnish, which basically means, I don't know what conversion varnish means actually, but it's a 2-part finish that works like a thin epoxy, basically. It's a sprayable epoxy, if you ask me. I have no idea on the chemistry, but it works just like an epoxy would, except that you can spray it. You have to spray it because it dries quickly, and you can't put it down with a brush or anything. But as soon as it sets up, this crystal, along with, they have a crystal sealer that goes with it, sets up and is sandable in about a half hour. So if things are going right with your finishing, you can have your project finished, in an afternoon, completely finished, which is awesome. It never works out that well because there's always, spots we want to futz with or things like that. But as far as the finish goes, this is what we use all the time, and it's super durable. Once it sets up, the only thing that I think will take it apart is paint stripper. And, if it's got paint stripper on it, then it's got it on it for a reason. So lacquer thinner, all that stuff won't hurt it. We use it on the bar tops. We use it on everything pretty much now, because if there's a chance of it getting wet, it needs to have the durability of the crystal. There's other manufacturers, of course, that make conversion varnishes. This just happens to be the line that I started using because it comes from my supplier. We get it from Compy Distributors. They're a great company to work with, and we get a lot of stuff from them. So this is a product I always use. Another thing for our finishing, I'm going to talk about finishing for a little bit because, like I said, we do a lot of it. especially with the live edge slabs. We spend a lot of time doing repairs on cracks and things like that and blending stuff in. I use trans tents a lot. I like to show them. I like to tell people about trans tent. I'd tell people about it all day long, whether they cared or not. But the trans tents, you can use them in a lot of things. You can use them just straight up as a stain. You can mix them into your top coats. You can mix them with fillers. They just work great. I use the trans tents are always in the shop and we're using them all the time. So if you haven't had a chance to use them, I'd recommend getting a couple bottles and have them around and use them whenever you can, because they are multi-purpose, fantastic items. And then a lot of people ask me, because they come in, they see the epoxy that we're using, especially working on the big slabs, and they always ask what kind of epoxy you're using. And I would say yes, we use like every kind of epoxy you could imagine for different reasons. This epoxy, this is available Home Depot, Bondo fiberglass resin. It's simple, straightforward, and quite inexpensive. It's only $40 something for this gallon as compared to hundreds for the other stuff. We use this resin for just general crack filling, smaller repairs, things like that, where the setup time and things like that aren't that big of a deal with the resin. You just trying to fill up a small spot. The one that we use a lot right now is the eco epoxy for bigger pours. So if you're doing a deep pour or a bigger fill, we use the eco epoxy because it sets up slower. If you've never used epoxy, the problem is when the epoxy, the thicker your pour, the hotter it gets. It has an exothermic reaction, and it'll basically bubble. It'll get too hot. It'll not work because it gets too hot, and it'll go bad. It'll turn into foam. It'll turn into like polyurethane glue almost. It'll just all bubble up and turn into foam just from the heat. It just boils. So the eco epoxy, which is made for thicker pours, basically sets up slower and will not get as hot. So your different epoxy you're going to use is going to be based on kind of like what you're trying to do with that epoxy and how much you're using. So the eco epoxy we use for the thick pours. And then we also use penetrating epoxy on a lot of soft spots. So if we got a spot that's on a tree that's still there, but it's going to fall apart in your hands, we use the penetrating epoxy, which is really thin, that soaks in and hardens up the slabs. And then we use a ton of super glue. If you don't use super glue very often, I recommend having super glue in the shop for everything. You can obviously glue things together quickly. We use it for all kinds of jigs and fixtures just to hold things temporary. But we also use it as a finish, and it hardens wood up. So if you had like a small soft spot in the wood, you can just soak it with the CA glue and hit it with the activator, and it will set up instantly. And then when they have the Star Bond in the dark, which we use for darker fills, you can see the slab that it's sitting on in the back corner behind it. That's got some epoxy fill in it. It's going to get sanded off later. But that same fill, you could use the CA glue for a smaller fill, just smaller spots. And then the other thing we use a lot that you wouldn't even think about, I call it the hot glue gun. It's not officially glue, but it shoots out what's basically looks like hot glue in different colors. And it works fantastic for speed. If you don't need to try to really, if you're just filling and not trying to hold anything together, we use this thing all the time. You just put the hot glue on it, you smash it down, and then we got a little cutter that comes with it that just cleans it right off, and it makes a perfect fill. It works really great. So then what I did today was I went around the shop and just took some photos so you can kind of see what we're working on in the shop, just to give you an idea. These guys, the one on the left is a little votive holder, little candle holder for a customer. It's of American Elm. The one on the right is a bathroom vanity It's actually got a super cool shape because the toilet goes to the left. And so you can have your sink on the right, and then it comes and it curves around to allow you to sit at the toilet, which is pretty cool. My customer picked that on her own. I told her I didn't have anything like that, and she kept snooping around my shop until she found it. She said, "What about this?" And it fit amazingly perfect, actually. You wouldn't believe it. I went and made a template for this job, and I brought it back and I set it on there, and I said, "I can't believe how well it fit. I almost needed to do nothing to it." And she didn't have a template with her. So I think that piece is pretty cool. That's walnut. That one, oh, and we cut those holes on the CNC, which is fantastic. So I can tell, I'll call them the kids because they're all younger than me and they love playing with the CNC. I can just say, "Hey, we need a hole here." And they can go program it on the CNC and cut them out perfect. I'm like, that's fantastic. These are a couple offcuts from a walnut slab we were working on, and they decided they wanted their offcuts to be little end tables. So this is a really piece of walnut, pretty pieces of walnut that we were working on. I like the curl on those. They're really nice. They're being finished today. And then this is the beginning of a dining room table. It's white oak. I thought it was good to show this one. I mean, you can tell it's gonna be cool when it's done, but we're gonna put them together like that with the crotches at opposing ends. So it's kind of wide at the ends and skinnier in the middle. Because if we put both crotch ends at one end, obviously you'd have a huge wide end at the table at one side and then skinny at the other side. But you can see where it's filled with epoxy and all the cracks. And then we use the penetrating epoxy on all the outside on the sapwood, which was really soft. It was mushy. Like you could grab that sapwood, and if you hit it hard enough, you could just smash it in your hands. So that's a penetrating epoxy, which totally soaks in. And then tomorrow, we did all that today. So tomorrow, all that'll be hard. And then we can run that through the wide belt sander, which, if you remember, I told you need to get one. You can put that in your wide belt sander and then put those two pieces together. So these are some of the finished pieces. This is the elm. I was telling you how fancy the elm is and how much I like it. This is a branch, one of the, probably the second log up in that really big elm log I showed you that was 6 feet wide at the ground and went up to 4 different logs up there. This is like one of the most pretty pieces of wood that I've seen. It's just got everything going on with all the swirls in it. It has epoxy fill in these cracks. We use mostly dark epoxy because it just looks the best naturally, I think. I try to tell people if they just, if there's like a slab on the wall or a piece of wood, if you kind of look at that piece of wood and you kind of squint at it, the cracks or the imperfections or the voids, they kind of look dark anyways, just naturally looks that color. And so we use a lot of the dark epoxy, and I think it just blends in really nice with it, unless somebody wanted if they wanted an exact color, like if they said they wanted blue or something like that, we might use that. But almost always we end up with a darker epoxy like that, which I think blends in super nice. This is a table that we built out of silver maple. A lot of people think that silver maple is not that great because it's kind of soft, which it is. I mean, you can dent it if you tried hard, but these pieces were too cool not to use. That's a book match pair, and they've got the the nice spalting on the edge. And this customer was okay with the pretty wacky shape because it's a pretty strong bow tie shape there coming out the fat corners. But I think it came out really cool, and I don't think they use the table that much anyways. So I think they're gonna make their friends they don't like sit at the crazy corner there. And then here's Patrick, one of the guys that works for me. He's doing a bench. And you can see now, that's a piece of walnut. And we're really using almost everything. I mean, in the past where we'd have been we're getting rid of that piece of wood. We can't do much with that. We've been using it. It turns into a really cool bench, actually. This thing has turned out super nice. And it worked out nice at the kind of really rotten section down there on the leg. Still holds it up. It works like it actually is better for it not to rock with that part of that middle of that missing. So it worked pretty nice. This is Sycamore, one of my faves. We use Sycamore a lot. I think it's got a lot of cool color in it. It can spalt nicely. It's nice just generally, even if it wasn't spalted, it's pretty cool. It's not ever straight. If you look at a Sycamore log, it always grows like in a wave. Like if I saw a Sycamore log laying out on the river anywhere, I can tell it's a Sycamore right away, because if you see the grain, it's always in a wavy pattern. So they're never, even the straightest Sycamore isn't that straight. So it's got a nice wave along the edge. And I like them because they're huge. They're commonly, 48 inches across, so we can get some really big slabs out of them. So I always have Sycamores in the shop because I can do a lot with them just because of the size. This is Hickory. I was telling you how much I like Hickory. And this is pretty common for the Hickory to look like that, to have all those bark inclusions, to have the knots, to have the different colors. This one's got a little spalting in it because the log sat a little longer, but it just works out. It just has so much going on and on a regular basis that it's hard not to like it. The only problem with Hickory is it is kind of stringy and kind of rubbery. I mean, it's hard, but it doesn't dry very flat. So it wants to kind of go all over the place when it dries. But once you get it dry, it's a nice hardwood to work with. This is Siberian Elm, which was a very nice looking table. It came out very good. We're doing mostly metal legs right now, because that's what's in style. That's kind of the rustic industrial thing. But this one, they ponied up the extra money for the wood base, which I'm glad they did. It looks super nice. I think it's really cool. It's all out of the same log, out of the same Siberian Elm log. So I will tell you though, it's uncommon though for us to do the wood base. 80% right now, what everybody's doing has a metal base. And then here's some more of that red elm that I think is super nice. A live edge bar. We're doing a lot of bar tops like that. And all of them have some epoxy. There's not a lot of fills in here, but there's some fill in the knot. And there's some other cracks down at the other end you can't quite see in this photo, but a lot of fills to do that. And all this went through the CNC to get flattened. And we use a CNC on the bottom side to put the pockets in, to join it together for we call them dog bones, to pull it together. And we're doing a lot of these too, little boards. A lot of cutting boards and things like that. This is just a cute little piece of bur oak that it just makes a really nice, cute little shelf. It's got a lot of curl and burl on it. And if I find little cute little pieces like that, that's a branch. I mean, and normally in the past, I probably wouldn't even milled it because it's not even that big. Like it doesn't seem worth milling, but everybody wants something for a charcuterie board or a cutting board. And I'm selling something like that. It's crazy, but selling for more per board foot than some of the big slabs, amazingly enough, if you break it down, because that board right there is selling for like $60 or $70. And there's only like 2 board feet in there. Like, that's a pretty good return. That's $35 a board foot. I will take that. Here's another live edge walnut top. We're doing a lot of bar tops. I think a lot of people at home right now drinking. I don't know, but there's a lot of bar tops going in. This is a walnut book mat. Well, here's a good picture of the shop. Look how much wood's in there. You can tell it's jammed with wood. That's a book match pear of walnut. That's a table that's getting ready to go out. We were working on putting the legs on it when we took that photo. This is a walnut top. This is epoxy with the black epoxy. This was in progress. So there's a lot of spots in the middle where this black epoxy is, where you can see it's kind of white. That was actually in the wood. There's like bark in there, and then kind of like the black epoxy it's not bubbles, but it just kind of is not super black. So all that goes in, and we got to go in and touch all that up to get it black to match everything else. But I think the black epoxy with the walnut looks pretty cool. That was a table that they were putting in a restaurant. And that's where you're going to use the eco epoxy or the stuff for the thicker pour. Because if you did any other epoxy that sets up too fast with that 2-inch pour, you just wouldn't be able to do it. It'll bubble up, but it won't come out that nice. And then here's an example of some charcuterie boards. I know a lot of people are doing these by hand, but we got all excited since we have the CNC. We're like, hey, look at this. You can just put the CNC out there. Cuts out perfect. And we can make whatever little shape we want. So with the funky handles or anything like that, that's why I need another CNC. So that can be happening while we're flattening slabs at the same time. Also in the style, and then we do a lot of our kind of rustic stuff. So we do a lot of beams, which these are actually just, we do a lot of white pine. They're hollow beams and then distress them to look like, you know, actual beams. It usually ends up being a package where we do the beams and the mantle and maybe some posts and things like that, where they're doing a whole room. These are super in style. So besides the slabs, we're doing a lot of the rustic beam stuff like that. Here's a good conversion to both. This is a mantle, which we're doing a lot of mantles to go with the rustic stuff, but this was a piece of walnut that I got out of the river too. So it just has, there's no stain or anything on that. That's just that jet black brown color just from being in the river. It's just really pretty, and the walnut just, it's easy to work with because it's just so nice. This one is a hollow one that we're making, again, out of white pine, and, you know, doing the hand hewn, and we even put the, on the end caps, they're even like end grain wood that's round, so it looks totally like a real beam when they're done. I could probably, these are very in style right now. I'd probably get at least a call or two a day on these kind of beams that I just can't make fast enough. And then of course, stuff like this with the rustic wood, you know, kind of cleaned up to be, in this case, an island, but you know, countertops and things like that. It seems like everybody's using wood now in a lot of places where they wouldn't have used wood before. You know, I think 10 years ago, if I said I was going to put wood on a countertop, you know, especially my wife, she'd say, no way, you can't put wood on a countertop. It never work. And there's woods, I mean, there's wood on countertops like crazy now. So it's good for me. People are putting wood everywhere. Here's Patrick looking guilty. This is a walnut top. Again, that you can cut on the CNC. So that's super nice. So you can be like, hey, let's just cut that shape out, and it cuts it out perfect. And this is just a rundown of kind of other stuff that we do. This is quarter sawn white oak that we salvaged from this job site and then built these doors. They came out pretty cool. That's Corey. This is our captain theme. We do a lot of trade show booths, and this one, it was kind of nautical themed. We're on the ocean, but those get fridges in them, and yeah, they're all refrigerators that go in all those slots at the trade show. Same thing here. This is for the refrigerators. This is a high-end cabinet that they. This one's a lot more detailed work than we normally do with the slabs. The slabs obviously are probably right now like 80% of the business, but we still do a lot of this type of work, more detailed work, cabinet work. Same thing, this kitchen, more modern, obviously, with quarter sawn white oak, or it's actually rift sawn white oak. But with the floating shelves, we're doing tons of floating shelves these days. It's, if you see it on HGTV, they're going to order it. So lots of floating shelves. And then this is all walnut, kind of rustic industrial. Same thing, just a lot of, you know, showing off the wood and not, you know, not doing too much else to it. And that's the end officially of my photos, my photo presentation. I'm assuming that we're going to have plenty of stuff to talk about with wood, because that's what I do. And I was worried that if I got off on one tangent that I would talk way too long about it. So what I wanted to do probably is, if I just get one question, like I said, I could probably talk for an hour and a half about it, but the main thing is that we're, at the shop, even though I have my wood problem, that we're still basically a custom woodworking shop that will do what we can, to salvage the logs and make them into something, more than just, compost at this point, more than mulch. And that's what really got me into this, was that I'd find free logs laying around, and I couldn't believe that people were turning them into mulch or cutting them into firewood when they should be doing something more with them, especially some of the really big trees that are, 80, 100 years old. They took a long time to grow, and people are making them into mulch, and I just couldn't handle that. So that's what led me down this path. And this is like my 20th year right now doing it full time. So this is where I've ended up.
Scott, Steve has asked, how wide is your belt sander?
Not wide enough. It's 36. We use, a lot of times when we're making something really big, like those big, book match tops, they're out of 2 pieces anyways. So both the individual pieces will fit in there. So we have to take a little extra care when we put the 2 pieces together to get them to go together as good as possible, so we don't have to do so much, hand sanding to feather that seam. But just the fact that you can go to the wide belt sander and get it to be, 98% right, perfectly flat, and, perfectly consistently sanded before you get all the chip out of it, because we can do almost anything with it. And as long as you leave yourself a 16th per side on that wide belt sander, you can get rid of they look like terrible chips. Like, you have a blowout on a hand planer or something or whatever. It looks like it just destroyed the thing. But a lot of times they're not deeper than a 16th of an inch. And as long as you can go that wide belt sander and get that all cleaned up, it just saves our bacon every day.
Barry Larson has 3 questions.
Yeah.
Talk about getting permission to retrieve logs, especially in urban wood, dealing with possible metal in logs, and how do you decide it's worth the effort to retrieve a log from the water?
Oh, hi, Barry, by the way. Well, I'll remember your last question first. Let's go there. The ones in the water, a lot of them, a lot of times they're cottonwood. I'm really good at identifying logs because I've been doing this so long. So I can tell just by the structure of the tree. If there's no bark, there's nothing on it, they're just gray trees. I can tell by the structure of the log, what kind of tree it is right away. And I don't really do anything with cottonwood. There's a lot of cottonwoods out there. So real quick, I'll skip over those because I just don't mess with them. The same thing, can be said with the sycamores. I can tell their structure right away. So as soon as I see a big log, and I know it's a sycamore because it's got a big taper to it, and it's not straight grain, and I can tell right away. The 2 big ones, they're either going to be cottonwood or sycamore. I'll go right to the sycamores, and the first thing I'll do is I'll just take the chainsaw and I'll just cut into it, and I can see how hollow or solid it is, and just that one end cut on the end, it'll tell you everything you need to know. You can tell if it's solid or rotten, and you can tell if it's spalted or not, or shaky. Sycamores tend to be shaky, which is where the annual rings come apart. So if you imagine you're peeling an onion and the way an onion just falls apart where all the rings come apart, if you had a log that's shaky, it'll just fall apart like that. Like all the rings it's just terrible. So if they're shaky, I'll pass them up too, because I'm basically looking on the river for a good solid log that is of a species that I know is good, that I like, that I know I can use and sell. And then hopefully on top of all that, that it's got some extra great figure. That's something special for another reason. Cause it's a big job to get the logs out of the river. It depends where they're at. If they're right by the boat ramp, it's not hard because I just pull my truck up there and pick them up. But if they take any actual work to try to, float them down the river or whatever, sometimes it takes, we might spend a day or a half a day or, 3/4 a day, full day, just to get one tree out of the river, which, if you go 5 miles upstream to get it, you got to make sure that it's worthwhile. And it's usually based on it being big. Like that walnut log that I showed, I mean, I could sell each of those slabs, out of that tree for $1,000. So, I mean, there's only a handful of, $1,000 slabs in there, but still, if I know that, then that'll pay. I have worked on that log for 2 days actually to get that thing out, but I know it's worthwhile at that point because I don't find walnuts that big that often, and I know it's that good. So, as far as getting permission from homeowners, or owners of the tree, the main thing is I just talk to them and try to be friendly and nice and tell them what's up and say, I'd like to do something with your tree if I can. I miss a lot of trees. People, are worried that I'm trying to get rich and they don't want to help me get rich, so they won't give me the tree. But a lot of people are like, I'm not going to do anything with the tree anyways, and they'll let me have it, and I go ahead and get it and try to do my best to, not mess their yard up and try to keep them involved as much as possible. But a lot of people want to see something done with the tree anyways. I get a lot of calls from people who are just sad that the tree's going away and they want something more to be done with it. And they don't really care about making money on it or anything. They just, they know it took 100 years to grow it. And I like the trees better standing up too. We all like them better standing up, but once they go down, they want to see something done with it. And those are the best people to work with, the ones that want to make sure that I get something out of it. And then what was the second question?
How do you deal with metal in logs?
Oh, I just cut it. I have a metal detector, and I used to take the time to, metal detect the logs and check to see, like, oh, I'm worried there's metal there. And then the metal detector would show that there's metal. And I know there's metal, it says there's metal. And so then what do you do? If it's a good log and it's a good, say I had a big walnut slab or a big walnut log that can make some nice slabs. In the past, I would have taken, the chainsaw and cut around the square, cut a square around the metal where I know it's at, chip that out, take it out so I don't mess up my blade. But the problem is then I have a slab, which I could have sold for $1,000, now has a giant hole in it. And so now I just say, you know what? It's worth cutting it. Half the time the metal's only on one side of the slab anyways. So you could always use the other side of the slab potentially. And if the metal's in the way when you go to machine it, put it through the planer or anything like that, you can always just beat that. It's usually a nail or something like that. You can either, chisel it out a little bit if you need to, or you can beat it down with a hammer to get it out of the way so you're not machining it. And then you still have your nice slab that only has a little bit of an imperfection in it instead of a giant hole. And you might have to spend some extra money on a blade or something. But if I'm cutting, like I said, if it's $1,000 slab and I'm cutting, and I waste 10 blades, each blade's 20 on the bandsaw, each blade's $20. So I've never wasted 10 blades, on a log to get through it, because you don't hit them that often, but it's worth it. So now we just kind of keep cutting. And if I get to a point though, where it's so riddled, like if you had white oak, the white oak stains when it gets metal in it. So it's very clear, it's evident, it shows you that there was metal stains in it. So if I'm cutting and all I'm getting is like metal stained wood that's not pretty and it just has metal stains all over it, then I'll just ditch it. I'll just kick it off to the side of the sawmill and stop working on it, because there's not any value in it. But oftentimes, if they're the big slabs, half the times it's part of the story. You'd be surprised how many people are excited that there's a nail in it. I don't know. Like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. Or especially bullets or something like that. They'll be super excited about things like that. So we just keep cutting.
Okay, someone says, I have elm trees dying. Are
Uh-huh.
you interested in harvesting them?
Potentially. I don't really cut the trees down. I usually salvage them after they're down. But if they were available after they were down, I'd definitely be interested in harvesting them.
Okay.
Elm trees are just super nice. I just love them. They're great.
Craig wants to know what brand your CNC router is and will the new one be the same model?
Is Craig thinking about buying one?
Don't know.
Well, based on what I would tell you, I would say he should. They're very fun. The CNC I have is from CNC Router Parts. It's an Avid CNC. I got it from somebody else that, I mean, I got it because it was a good deal, not so much because it was a CNC that I wanted, but I didn't know what I wanted or how much I would use it. It seems to work perfectly fine. It's not a super rigid machine, but it seems incredibly accurate. Whenever we, I know I can get a more stout machine. Okay, so when it runs, since it's kind of a do-it-yourselfer machine, you build it, you put it together. It's kind of like an erector set, but when it runs and it runs super accurate, like it's amazing, because we'll cut something out. Like if we cut like a sink cutout, you know, it dives down to 1/16 of an inch, cuts the circle or the oval or whatever, and then it goes back, does another 1/16 down, and you can tell how deep to cut, so you can keep it within the parameters that the machine can handle, and it'll do a 1/16, go back down, do a 1/16, go back down, do a 1/16, and it still just amazes me every time that it can do it so accurate that every little cut is exactly where that last cut would be, and after it goes around that 20 times, it's cut through 2 inches thick of wood with this perfect cut. And the only way that you can tell that it went down, you know, each step is there's a little bit of tear out, and it's not much. It's a micro amount of tear out. You got to get down there. You have to sand a little bit, but this micro amount of tear out, you know, where the end of the end mill was at, it's just amazing when it does it. It's just, when we run that CNC, everybody just stops in the shop. Everybody comes in the shop. I lose so many man hours with people staring at that CNC, because everybody's just like, oh, wow. It's just mesmerizing. It's like watching fire. It's just amazing they can do it so well. I had one video in here. I need to see if I can figure out how to do this. I'll make my screen smaller again, because I know I had a little video in here with the CNC. I probably can't. I'm not smart enough to do this right now.
Yeah.
I might figure it out. But anyways, while we're talking, I can figure it out. I'll show you that the CNC video is amazing. Any other questions?
Somebody else has asked how often you go log hunting on the river.
Not as often as I'd like. I go out there so I go out a lot. So what are you seeing right now, by the way, on your end?
You?
Your face. Okay. Real quick let me see if I can share this real fast. Maybe I can. Maybe I can't. Okay. Anyways, I'll answer the question. So I enjoy going out on the river, and I go out when the weather is conducive, meaning that I don't mind when it's hot. So if we get wet, that's fun. I like that. I'm not interested in dying. So we go out there when the water's not too cold, because I know from watching plenty of Deadliest Catch that if you fall in the water, when the water is cold, that you don't have as long to live. So yeah. I consider myself a decent swimmer, so I make sure that the water is warm enough that if we end up in the water, there's not going to be a problem. So it's mostly in the summertime.
Yeah. Bill Shukow wants to know if you see much cherry wood.
You mean logs, I guess?
I guess, yeah.
I do. There's an amazing amount of cherry logs out there. I mean, most people don't know what a cherry log looks like, but almost every yard that's got a decent amount of trees in it, especially if they have a fence line, has a cherry tree in it. People don't realize that it's a cherry tree, but they get spread nicely by the birds, and they just tend to grow in they're opportunists, so they grow up in little, along fence rows and stuff like that. And if somebody lets them go long enough, they get a chance to get big. There's a lot of cherry trees out there.
Okay.
Most people just don't know what they are because a lot of them look kind of spindly and squirrely and not worth much. So it's just nice to find a big one.
Okay. Well, Scott, that's all the questions that people have asked. You have any final words? I think it's pretty obvious you like what you're doing for a living.
I do. Actually, you know what? Hold on real fast. I had a couple more notes. Okay, real quick. I do have, I asked the guys today when I was working on this, I said, okay, tell me the things that happen in this shop that I haven't thought of that, that I might want to share with people. And there was a couple of them, and there was like, what kind of questions do people ask all the time? And one was, do I buy trees? And the answer is no. I get all my trees for free, and it's an integral part of my business plan that I get them for free and I turn them into money. Now, with that said, I have been known to buy a tree or two if it's a giant walnut. But other than that, I don't buy trees. So I get them for free because I'm scrappy enough to go and find them and bring them in. And then the other question, you'll appreciate this, everybody always asks me is, can I work for free? I get plenty of people that come in and want to work in the shop and donate their time. And I think at least one person a day asks if I'm hiring. And the answer is yes, you can come in and work for free if you're wondering. So I have that business. I have that plan with a lot of people who come in, and I have a lot of guys that work one day a week because they're retired. They're friends of mine, and they always said that when they retire, they want to come and work for me, and they work one day a week just for fun. And it's fun for me too. I like to share it with everybody else too. So
yeah, sounds like a good business plan. No expenses.
That's the whole point. You just gotta be scrappy to turn it into money.
Yep. All right. Well, Scott, thanks very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Didn't realize how big a business that was out there. And
I didn't.
Looks like you've done a great job with it. I hope I hope wood stays in style.
You know what? I think it's going to stay in style for a long time.
That's a good deal then.
Yeah, especially as long as stuff is made in China, people are going to always want real wood, I think. So.
Yep. All right. Thanks very much, Scott. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Thanks to everybody who joined us in the meeting tonight, and we'll see you next month. Take it easy. Be safe.